Hello everybody, it's Walter TGB here, back with another travel guide, and this time we're going to be going from Copenhagen over to Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, another city in Scandinavia that I recently just visited for the second time, where I also speak their language and am very involved in their culture and politics and know a lot about the country, so I'm very interested in Sweden and in Stockholm specifically. My second visit really fleshed out my view of the city, and in this video, I'm going to dive all into all of the best stuff that's here to see. And down the road, I'll also be making a video about Uppsala, which is a nearby city that is also relatively well known. Stockholm is, frankly, the capital of Scandinavia with tons to see and do, and though there's a major contrast between the old town called Gamla and the more modern areas to its north and south, the whole city is beautiful. But in this video, we're going to structure it going from island to island, as there are 14 in Stockholm, but we won't be going over all of them, just the best ones, and we're going to start with the island of Stockholmen. This island is the center of it all, making up the majority of Gamla stan, and it's full of most of the important attractions in the city. One of these is the beautiful Storkyrkan church, which is the cathedral of Stockholm. What mainly makes this one stick out isn't a particularly impressive interior, but rather its very unique exterior and the really cool and impressive statues that are inside. It's definitely worth checking out, at least for a few minutes. And right nearby there is the underrated German church with beautiful organs and golden booths. And I gotta say, the German church might be the best church in all of Stockholm, although I might be biased because, fun fact, but the first time I visited Stockholm, I tried going into this 4 times, and every single time it was closed, so it became like a bucket list item for me to finally go see it. It became an inside joke with me and a lot of people I know that I needed to see this for my life to be complete. But even without that joke, the German church is really impressive and definitely worth checking out when you're in Gamla stan. You also have the Nobel Prize Museum, which, not gonna lie, seems like an overly expensive tourist trap to me, so I didn't go to it and I can't tell you much about it. Unless you're really interested, though, I wouldn't recommend it. And then the major attraction of Gamla stan, and specifically of Stockholmen, is the Royal Palace, which honestly I think has some underwhelming bits. For example, the treasury is basically just 2 rooms, and while it houses some interesting things, it's definitely one of the smallest and most uninteresting treasuries that I've ever seen. And there's also a museum, the 3 Crowns Museum, which I think is incredibly boring personally. However, on the flip side, it has a beautiful chapel that is probably the highlight of the palace, and then of course the royal apartments, which are sort of the focus of visiting any royal palace that you go to. And while there are some great rooms here, in my opinion, it's a bit too much. It goes on for way too long, which causes the impressive aspect of a lot of these rooms to sort of dwindle and weaken over time. I think if it was more compact, like the Christiansborg palace that I talked about that's in Copenhagen, then I would like it a lot more. But as it stands, it's good, but you can actually do better. Not necessarily in Sweden or Stockholm, but in other countries. But when you're here, I'd say still go to it. I also didn't know this, but the Medieval Museum's new location is right around here too. Unfortunately, I did not know that until I started making this video and had already left Stockholm, but that's considered one of the best things to visit there, so if it remotely interests you, you should probably go see it as well. Just wandering the streets around here is beautiful and impressive by itself, but one building you should definitely give extra attention to is the Riddarhuset, which is the former, basically, home of where the nobility once ruled over Stockholm and Sweden before Sweden was a democracy. It's a really interesting historical place, and it's known as the most exclusive building in Stockholm, as it's only open for like 2 hours a day, certain days of the week. So I was really lucky to be able to go in here, but the history behind it makes it absolutely worth seeing if you can. And right across from this, we have the island of Riddarholmen, which is basically defined by the Riddarholms Kyrka, which is a really cool church with an amazing spire, and it houses the tombs of members of the royal family, which definitely pushes it into the top 3 of all churches in Stockholm, and one of the best churches in all of Sweden. The final island that makes up Gamla stan is Helgeandsholmen, which is also defined basically by one building, this time being the Swedish Parliament, or Riksdag. They offer great free hour-long tours here, which are really interesting because you get to not only see the main chamber, where they obviously govern the country from to this day, but also the beautiful main staircase and the impressive east wing, where they used to have their upper house before it became a unicameral system. So they used to have 2 houses of parliament, essentially, and this one was abolished about 100 years ago, I believe. But before that, that's where this was housed, and you can still visit it today, which is pretty cool. This is a true hidden gem that not a lot of people talk about, but since it's free and really cool, I'd really recommend it. Just make sure you show up 15 minutes before the tour is meant to start at the latest, probably a bit earlier, because they won't accept any groups larger than 28 people. Then we move on to Kungsholmen, which houses some pretty areas and its own church, but it's mainly worthwhile just to visit the Stockholm City Hall, which is probably the best thing to see in this whole city and one of the best things to see in the whole country, full stop. The tour is perfect, bringing you through a handful of massive rooms, each one of which being more impressive than the last, and eventually culminating in the world-famous Golden Hall, which is one of the best things to see not just in Sweden, but all of Europe and possibly the world. It has amazing architectural details, design, and history all meeting in one place, and you can even climb the tower for some great views of the city, but I will warn you, the climb is pretty long and brutal. Then we have Södermalm, which is a very nice, more modern area, which offers some nice views from the Monteliusvägen and has the somewhat famous photography museum Fotografiska, but otherwise, there's really not much here to see. The islands of Skeppsholmen and Kastellholmen contain some sites like the Modern Art Museum and the Kastellet, but are not particularly interesting. Instead, we're going to now move on to what is the best area to visit other than Gamla stan, Djurgården, which is basically a massive park with a ton of museums. The Vasa Museum is probably the most famous of these, but personally, I was a little bit let down by it, mainly because it's so hyped up and really expensive. I mean, I suppose it's all right, and if you're interested in this kind of thing, then you'll probably love it, but I don't know why people act like it's the be-all, end-all of things to do and see here when you have the City Hall and Skansen, the open-air museum to end all open-air museums. Now, I didn't necessarily expect to like this because I don't usually go to open-air museums, but I loved it. The old buildings and the nature combined to make you feel like you're in another world, and seeing all the animals like the bears, the wolverines, was also really cool. I would say that this and the City Hall are the best sites in all of Stockholm, although I will warn you that I saw this and I visited Skansen in May, right when it started to open, and there weren't many people around, but perhaps when it's high tourist season, I can imagine it wouldn't be as peaceful and enjoyable, but who knows. On Djurgården, you can also find the Nordic Museum, Viking Museum, the Gröna Lund amusement park, and the ABBA Museum if you want to waste a bunch of time and money on something stupid. But the rest of Stockholm, with neighborhoods such as Norrmalm and Östermalm, are actually not on an island, so it's time to move from the islands to the mainland. You can find a lot of museums in Östermalm, like the National Museum, History Museum, Army Museum, and the Medelhavs Museum, which is actually really quite cool if you're interested in seeing a lot of old artifacts and curiosities. In general, this is a beautiful modern area that's great if you want to shop. This is actually where I stayed the second time that I visited. But in terms of attractions, it's kind of scarce. You do have the Royal Library, but to be honest, it's really lame compared to the one in Copenhagen and definitely to the one in Helsinki, even though it does include one very cool artifact, that being this massive old book with a crazy story behind it. But the real thing you'll want to do here and throughout all of Stockholm is ride their exceptional subway system, the Tunnelbana, to different stations, all of which have a different style to them and are technically considered the largest or longest art gallery in the world. T-Centralen is a really iconic one that you ought to see, especially since you'll probably come here anyway because it's the main central train station. And then you have Rådhuset, which is right by the city hall and is decently cool, but it is outshined by the highlights, which for sure are Kungsträdgården, which is with its awesome Roman style, Fridhemsplan with its massive random ship, which I don't know why it's there, but it's cool, and Torridsplan, which is actually above ground, but it's full of art inspired by 8-bit video games. And the station I stayed by, Hötorget, is also quite cool, and there are plenty others that you'll want to check out as well. I'd say that this is certainly one of the best things to do in Stockholm, especially if all of the other stuff is closed or the weather sucks. It's just something that you can really do any time of day, so it's a convenient attraction. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this video is helpful if you were interested in Stockholm already or made you interested, because it's a truly amazing city, possibly one of, if not my favorite city that I've ever visited. And it's really just got everything you could want. It's got a lot to do and see as a tourist, but it also feels like it'd be very nice to live there, provided you have the moolah to do so. So definitely check it out if you can. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it was helpful. Thank you guys for watching. Be safe, everyone, and goodbye. I'll see you next time.